we'll go ahead and get started. You want to kick this one off, Mr. Brossart? Or is that Sean's? Or Sean's?
We ready?
Yes, we're ready. Ready to get started.
So this is the part of the workshop that's really the commission's, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
And so, you know, we think we have probably, hopefully we've presented the things that we needed to address and update the commission on. And so now the commission can lead your discussions on some of the items that have been discussed that are programmed into the budget or changes, or you know whatever other direction the commission wants to give to staff.
Okay, great. One of the discussions we usually have is whether or not the 5% anticipated rate is right, and so I'm going to kick off to Commissioner Reed on that for years 2 and 3.
Well, obviously, I'm always for our employees, and I think the 15 years and the 5% and the merit pay and all that is well deserved, and I'm 100% behind it.
Wonderful, wonderful. The 12.15% to get us to the 10.68 in fiscal year 24, and the property appraiser's report seems to be reasonable. This provides the general fund with approximately $1.4 million in new construction revenues and $4.9 million in increased taxable value revenues at the current millage rate. We know we're certainly in a period of time where there are unanticipated expenses, all of the chemicals we just talked about today, and you don't know what kinds of increases can occur in the course of that. The rollback rate would be 5.0030 if we did a rollback. And the recommendation is that the commission authorize the finance director to advertise the city's millage rate at the existing rate at 5.4323 for fiscal year 2024, which is our 2023 millage rate. Now, that's really the focus point of the discussion. What are your thoughts?
I think that, I'm sorry, I don't, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know, I see there's two things that I would look at. One is I don't want to back us into a corner where we don't have any room to move, right? So adopting right now the lowest that we possibly can, where we have no reason, you know, no way to wiggle over these next, you know, month and so while we're finalizing the budget. But so I think going with the advertised recommended makes sense to me. So.
Commissioner McLeod?
I agree. I was going to say something similar, Commissioner Music, as I think the second bullet point is important at this point in the process, that we can't always lower the rate from the advertised rate, but if we try to do the opposite, that it's more complicated and you have to re-advertise. So to me, it makes sense to go with the current rate and as the budget has been presented.
Commissioner
Thank
Reed?
you. And I guess we're getting down probably close to the end from what I gather. We're getting,
Yes, sir.
I'm in favor of the 5.43323 as well. I do have a issue I would like to ask Michael, what do we currently spend this year already on the affordable housing?
We've got $1 million in the general fund. We've got $1.5 million in the CRA, and we've contributed $1 million in ARPA monies.
Getting $3.5 million.
3.5 available this fiscal year. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be spent
In
this fiscal
addition
year.
to the $1 million on here?
Well, yes, sir. If you added that, then it would be 4.5 million. If you're looking at 2 years.
I would like to see that $1 million rolled into our new Section 8, Station 8 construction fund.
Well,
Please need the dialogue for that.
okay, with respect to, you mean Station 8, not Section 8, because I got my,
Because the construction.
because we were in affordable housing, you see, that kind of,
Well, we could take that money and put it into the
Right.
construction of Station 8.
so really, we're trying to allow that to be a separate discussion in terms of their planning as they go forward, could be part of the construction. What do you have do you have PIP funds on construction, or is that all equipment?
Let me pull this up here. The funds we have are based on, they're not, and there are no funds. We've budgeted to borrow, which is in the general fund. But let me grab
I'm not really asking for that number per se.
what we
Right.
set aside for the station construction. I think I had, station construction was 3.7 million, and then we had the furnishings. So we were just a hair shy of $4 million when we were talking about it in '22.
And we have to borrow that money, don't we?
And we will have to borrow that money, that's correct, unless we have
So
monies that.
This would not, we're gonna borrow $1 million less, basically.
And I would suggest that number is probably low at this point, based
It
on
would, it'll be
construction.
30% low.
Yeah, it's,
Anyway,
yeah.
Question on that. Thank you, Mayor. Is that something we can keep as an option? You could approve this budget as is, Commissioner Reed, and without necessarily line iteming that 1 million, moving it from affordable housing to the station
I'm
fund.
not opposed to it, I just wanna, I'm more interested in having a fire station than I am in, there is no finance for affordable housing right now, in my opinion. And so I would rather see that money moved into, that, at some point in time, before we could adopt our budget, I'd like to try to at least have an additional discussion
sure.
to move it over that area.
well, and there's certainly room within that budget to add, within this budget to add that to it if we had the need and desire and wanted to do so. So I think that for us, currently, it's really to make a decision with respect to the millage. And with this budget as proposed, and then, of course, when we get back together, that could be something that could be enhanced.
Talk about
You know,
I've got a question, if I may.
Commissioner Simmons.
I understand that the legislature provided additional funds for affordable housing. Is that correct? Did we get any of that money?
yes. So that's part of the affordable housing money that we use. Then,
How much did we get additionally? Do you know?
Mike's
Mike's not
not in here. This out of the Sadowski fund. It's
sale.
the,
Yeah, and
Between CDBG, SHIP, and home, the total budget for fiscal year '23 is around
5.9 million is what Deidre said.
What is that compared to last year's amount? Do we know?
okay, thank you. Do you know the prior year, Deidre, roughly, the prior year?
The same thing.
Brian, like,
Yeah, Brian's got that.
She's gonna find out, she's gonna research it.
Okay, okay.
So what we're trying to talk about here is, are we gonna lock in on a millage rate that we can all approve of? And things like, because I'm agreeing with Tiger on this at this point, but then we kind of get to the next
Yes,
point, and then
yes.
Yeah.
we'll get in the weeds. And-
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And that we advertise
Yeah,
the rate.
the
The
rate's
not
reason
the final
is that you
approval, we're
have to
still.
advertise
yes.
the rate days out.
Yep.
Okay, well, we can kind of move from that and go to deciding on what the millage rate's gonna be.
Okay,
All right.
all right. And just to reemphasize on affordable housing, the $1 million that we put aside creates $27 million worth of construction. And so the multiplier on affordable housing is huge. It's where where people are gonna do that building. And do they do it in larger cities, or do they come and do us as a mid-sized city as well? And so our ability to attract it and to utilize the funding that helps to grease that skid is subject to whether or not we have opportunities. And if we don't, if someone doesn't come, it doesn't get spent, but it is available to be an incentive.
Well, I'm for both the Northwest Station, as Commissioner Reed is, as well as affordable housing.
Bet,
So
you
I
bet.
want both of them.
Yeah, you bet, and that's all staff's desire too, there's no question.
So we get $3.5 million we can put to that stuff too, so.
Sure,
I'm just looking, I want to reduce potential debt service and maybe expedite things we can get done quicker.
Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to, I know this was scheduled to go till 4 or 5 today, and I'm looking at my page. Looks like this is hurrying to a conclusion to just adopt the millage and then get into the weeds later. Is that what the mayor was saying?
On anything else that would be additions, if
Okay, because my worry is, I know in years past, when you wait to those last budget hearings, if there's things that people are wanting to spend money on, I feel like we had an afternoon today carved out, already planned in our time, that we should use that and not get to our last 2 budget hearings and say things that we want to be added. I just would worry that we, when you said get in the weeds later, like, how many weeds would there be at the next meeting to discuss?
Maybe first and second hearing.
Well, I know, but like, I'm just saying, like, if today we were scheduled to, it's 12:30. And then we have 2 evening hearings. I feel like those evening hearing meetings are supposed to be more sealed up and not have a lot of weeds to discuss.
So the goal would be, since we don't have everything that could be considered together beyond what we've discussed today, to get those things consolidated and certainly get those covered each in one-on-ones, so that those could then be, we can get a mutual voice in the process of that and decide what could be considered.
Okay, so I'm looking at my colleagues. You have things that you'd like to discuss in your one-on-ones, is what I'm hearing, and that will come forward at an additional meeting? I don't know, this is the only time we get to talk to each other, so
Sure.
I don't know, there might be things that my colleagues have that they'd like to discuss in one-on-ones to bring forth at the next meeting. That makes me a little nervous.
I don't have other budget items right now, Commissioner Madden, that I plan to bring forward between now and the first hearing in September that I can expect would significantly change this picture. I mean, I guess that could always change as we go along, but today I didn't have anything that I wanted to say, well, can we fund this out of this budget?
And I concur with the same thing. I don't think of anything that I want to bring up as well at this point. And unless something y'all bring up, then I can put my penny's worth in it. But at this juncture, I think I've expressed the only really point I wanted to make on that affordable housing component.
I don't have anything to add either. I like where we are with the millage rate right now. I understand your hesitation because I wouldn't want to be blindsided at a September meeting by something that maybe someone else brought up in a one-on-one. I'm not planning to bring anything up in a one-on-one with regard to budget. Like, I'm good with where we are right now, even maintaining that affordable housing at $1 million. So I don't have any addendums to make.
Yeah, so my position would be that, again, I would rather spend money than borrow, even though I get the leveraging. I would rather that. The only thing, and I don't have anything to add either, except for the fact that I would be a proponent of probably expediting the payment for the
Museum?
Yes, the museum.
Yeah,
They've
I thought
dug,
about that too.
they've dug ground, they're in there, they're ready to, they're gonna be done in 18 months or whatever, they're open again. So that's the one thing that I would probably, but I don't have anything specifically. So, I mean, in my opinion, I would like to hear the things that she's got so that it can be marinating and staff as well can be that. That would be my opinion, but I don't have anything to add other than what's been brought up.
I certainly have something. I got one item I'd like to bring up, and as a consideration, it's not a lot of money compared to what our budget is, and that's the PAL programs, a new facility. We're going to get a new facility for them, and I attended the Justice Department's forum on last night at Coleman Bush Building, and something was said that actually resonated with me, and that is that young boy, police officer, a couple of months ago, and something was said was that young boys will be a part of something, whether it's games but they want to be a part of something, and so I'd rather for them to be a part of an organization like PAL, where they get healthy alternatives to gang violence and gang mischievous stuff. So I would like to propose that we come up with $100,000 to get them started. PAL is a 501c3 organization, which means they can raise their own money. But I certainly like for the city commission to provide $100,000 toward that effort.
And I think so there's a good example of something that would be great for the PAL board to take a look and say, what would we like to have that could come up in our one-on-ones and be one of the things that we could talk about. So that's a good example of that. And you might have some others that other people bring up, but I don't think there's anything big. There's no body cam issues hanging out there, okay?
Well, I mean, the thing that I'm glad that Commissioner Simmons brought up the PAL, because last year I know it was a big part of our discussion with LPD and getting the new officers.
Right.
And I'm assuming that all of that is on autopilot with this budget. It wasn't a big highlight or feature of today's discussions. So, but I know assumptions are not always the wisest way to move forward. So I also, with LPD in perspective, not having SROs in our schools, that was a huge decision that was made that I don't feel like we've heard back on how that's affecting our LPD budget. I know that the school board paid for a percentage, was it 80% of our SROs in the schools?
It is baked into this budget. I think it was a net of, Sammy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like it was a net of $650,000 net cost to the general fund to have those 12 officers stay with us full-time, and that is included in the budget. Yes, ma'am.
And if I may, just to the point, Commissioner Madden, we have taken those SRO positions and we have basically backfilled them into the vacancies that we had for other needs in LPD, which is one of the reasons why, we had talked in previous years about even more expansion of the police force at some point, but having those positions to now spread out into the other service areas of LPD has kept us from needing to make that request for a headcount increase at the police department this year.
Okay, so I would just say the thing I was planning to speak about today was that discussion. With knowing we last year raised money for body cameras and additional LPD, and knowing that SROs were being absorbed into the FTE count at LPD, I feel very concerned about being on the gang task force with Commissioner Walker, and knowing that we had shootings and things that necessitated a neighborhood policing approach, and our SROs were a vital, critical component of knowing the kids who live in our neighborhoods. Not just knowing them because they show up at an MLK parade or because they're at the Coleman Bush, festivities, but because they're in the schools every single day. And they know the kids' family lives, they know the kids' friends, they help them when they see that they're a little off, and that has kept our city safe, and it's kept kids off of drugs and out of prison, and PAL has, I would say, been fledgling a little bit. We had a pandemic that precluded them from, participating in sports and gathering in large groups. We had a leadership change, from more of the nonprofit board to going back under LPD. And I, as a parent of 6 children and as a mother of this community, cannot feel comfortable if we do not have our SROs in our classrooms and in our schools, and we don't have a fortified PAL effort because it's under LPD, and have LPD somehow in these children's lives. If they're not in their schools, where are they going to make these relationships? Where are they going to be able to preempt gang activity and terrible things that could happen in our city that we just take for granted, that we have had so few incidents of gang activity and shootings and those things that we had prior to a concerted effort towards neighborhood policing, SROs in classrooms, the gang task force. To my knowledge, we really don't have the gang task force anymore. Now we don't have the SROs. That makes me very concerned about a huge gap with our children. And so I don't think 100,000 is nearly enough to help support our fortified PAL. If PAL is where we're turning our efforts, and you might say, no, we have another strategy for neighborhood policing now that we don't have SROs meeting those kids every single day, every single day. I mean, to me, that's a huge gap to fill, and I don't know the answer, but I certainly want to hear what LPD is planning for that.
Sure.
And I want to be a contributor for that, and I don't know if that's a PAL building, a bigger expanded services, you know, so that kids can be there every day. I know we have other, you know, Kelly Rec and Simpson Park, and we have summer camps. I'm just saying, I need someone to help me feel more comfortable that SROs not being in our classrooms and not having the gang task force and not having some of these things that have been instrumental. I don't want to finish the budget cycle knowing that we've had shifts there, because it's a budgetary item, and not feel like those things are addressed. And you know, maybe you'll say, Stephanie, we're fine in our strategic planning retreat for next year. That's on tap, and we're going to talk a lot about it, you know, but that was my high priority I wanted to talk about
So
today.
Chief Taylor, can you weigh into that?
Sure. As part of the redistribution of the SROs, first of all, the schools will have SROs in them. They'll just be deputies. They won't be Lakeland police officers.
They won't know our city.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Yes, our neighbors.
And as part of that plan, we're gonna have a liaison officer that's still gonna be an SRO, that's gonna liaison with the public schools, but that's only one position. I would imagine that he or she is gonna spend, we haven't identified who that person is yet, is gonna spend the majority of their time at Lakeland High School, but they can float between Lakeland, you know, the middle schools, which are the main priority, Southwest, Lakeland Highlands. We also have redeployed one of the former SROs and then added them to PAL. So in addition to the 2 full-time PAL officers, now we're going to have 3. We've also added additional personnel to the neighborhood liaison unit that came from the SROs, former SROs as well as beefing up the narcotics unit. We still do have the gang task force unit. We just renamed it. It has the same focus. Now it's called the Community Engagement Task Force with the same mission still. So I think that's more of an appropriate moniker for that. And I think they're still doing the same mission. So I can tell you that I'm comfortable with the plan that we have moving forward. I'm interested to see how this liaison works because it will be deputies in our school. You're absolutely correct. And we will not have the day-to-day contact like we used to have. But that is beyond this commission's control and certainly beyond my control.
And Chief, if I may, Commissioner Madden, just to add to that point, Chief and I went and met with the superintendent, and we went and met with representatives from the sheriff department, and it was actually our request that we consider some type of a liaison type position for the same concerns that you have, to try to at least continue, even if it's a coordinated effort between that liaison position and those Polk County SROs in the school. But it was our request that has given us that opportunity now that Chief has.
I have another
discussed.
meeting scheduled, I think Tuesday, down in Bartow with them to kind of flesh out and firm up what that's going to look like. We're going to obviously attract and track some numbers to find out the number of contacts that we've had. My fear is, or what I don't want this liaison officer to become is a fill-in officer or a fill-in deputy. Or if they have an SRO deputy that can't work that day because of a family issue or sick, that they just reach out and say, hey, can we have your liaison deputy come fill in, or liaison officer come fill in? That's not what I want. I don't want them to become a adjunct deputy. That's not the goal. I want them to be out there to be available to float from Lakeland High School down to Lakeland Highlands over to Southwest. You know, I want them to be able to do that. And then we're going to track the number of contacts they have, and we'll certainly be able to report back to you, you know, the success. And it may be at some point we decide that we're going to do 2 of those, you know, and we may do 3 of those, you know, and the school board and has been very helpful. And they, you know, as far as they're concerned, we can have as many as we want. I guess it's just a matter of how we want to fund it. You know, they're willing to do 80-20 funding on the liaison, so we're going to take them up on that offer. But we may decide to move forward with more if this one works out.
And the role, do a job description of that liaison.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're in the process. What we're trying to flesh out tomorrow. What does that look like? Because this is new to us as well. As I mentioned at the very beginning, you know, Lakeland Police Department had the first SRO unit in the county back in the 80s. We came up with the idea in Polk County, but effectively we're out of the SRO business with the exception of the private schools, Lakeland Christian, and several of the private schools around Florida Southern, Montessori School, New Beginnings. I think that's about it. So.
Okay, on the Community Engagement Task Force, who's the
Ma'am.
commissioner liaison on that?
I don't know. It used to be Commissioner Walker, but I don't know that there is a commissioner assigned to that, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if Commissioner Walker transitioned that to someone or not. We had one last night, and we had a meeting last night. It's mostly just community stakeholders. Assistant Chief Tarver has been chairing that. He's going to hand that off to Captain Kimball. She's now going to become the chair of that committee, since she's over the SROs. So we think that'd be more appropriate.
I can't answer that question, then I don't have the sheet. Okay.
You do not have a commission.
I don't think
So
there
that's
is.
why I felt like it, kind of had dissolved, because there's not a commissioner,
Yes, ma'am.
keeping us apprised. Okay, and so, in your opinion, do you feel like, making your observations in the last several years with the PAL program and kind of, getting through COVID, do you feel like the PAL program is something
Yes, ma'am.
that you can engage kids,
I think we
know
can.
kids in the neighborhood
Yes, ma'am.
through the sports programs and the after-school?
I do, especially expanding it, and if we can move forward with a standalone building. I mean, we're engaging probably 600 to 800 kids now a year. If we can bump that up over 1,000, I think that's ideal. And the location is key too, where we put the PAL building. So, whether it ends up at Simpson Park or some other location, but I think that's important too. So, we've visited several other standalone PAL buildings, Jacksonville, Tampa, St. Pete, that have their own standalone PAL building, just to kind of get an idea what that looks like. It's going to be expensive, I can tell you that. So, but I think that's a great idea, and it's a great way to engage the kids in the neighborhood and give them a place to go after school. Because I think it is important that we give them
Connects them
something
with
to do.
LPD.
Absolutely.
That they see our men and women in blue as their friend and as their mentors.
As their coach, yeah.
Yes.
That's why we added one additional officer. We have one sergeant and 2 officers now. We're soon to be a sergeant and 3 officers, plus 2 civilians as well. So Crystal Davis, these guys know everybody in the neighborhood. They know them all, and the kids know these officers. So I think that's an alternative route to get to them. And I think, if we're not allowed to have the SROs in the public schools, then let's beef up the PAL and see if we can't use that to make some headway.
So Commissioner Simmons, as for one, I would make this a very high priority to put as much funds as possible towards the PAL program.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I think, the real steps in that are that they come to us with a recommendation and that we can quantify, and then we take a look at
Yes,
it and figure out how to fund. Commissioner
And
McConnell.
added to that, I know since it is a 501c3 and that we've had some transition from their board and the oversight of what the organization looks like, I would highly recommend that they also bring to us a development plan of, if this is how much we need, this is the partnerships that we need strategically across the community. Because I'm sure, just like Girls Inc. and just like New Beginnings and several other nonprofits throughout the community, there are some strong supporters. We just have to get the message out correctly, and I don't know if there's anybody on the team that's a development person per se as far as fundraising, but I
Commissioner
think that'd be a
Selvage is
critical.
pretty good. Former
Pardon?
Commissioner Selvage is on the board. He's
Oh,
pretty
well,
good.
he's very, very good at it, but he also has a full-time job. So, we can try to fund it with bake sales and car washes, but I think the
not gonna
ultimate
get us
goal
there,
is to
yeah.
really look at having a development component of somebody strategically thinking of the partnerships they have around the community at large, beyond Lakeland, because this is something that is completely, we as a city can only do so much as far as funding, and sustainability of a project. So as the nonprofit expert that sits on this board and this commission, there has to be a sustainable game plan of what that's gonna look like moving forward. And, I'm happy to, I also have a job outside of this. And I'm happy to sit down with anyone to talk about what that might look like, or engaging like a Holly Parish or somebody like that to really build out that strategic plan from a development standpoint. Because I don't think the stopgap of us hoping that there's money in a budget where we're providing services across the community that impacts everybody in all of our residences. I think we need to have a more holistic approach to how we sustain it, because it is a critical, vital program we all know and I think agree with, for our youth and for our community at large. But I also think that telling that story to potential sponsors is a critical component of this.
We are certainly going to lean very heavily on whatever expertise we can get from the community, because I assign police officers out there. They are not builders. They're not fundraisers. They're excellent at breaking things,
Right.
and wrecking cars, by the way, but we're not, we're not
They
so
do
good at maybe
wonderful
raising
work.
money, yeah, raising
No, and-
money and
yeah,
building
there-
buildings. That's
But
not what we
that's the
do.
important, that's why I want to bring that to the forefront of
Right.
everyone's mind, is that is a critical component that is necessary in any type of program like this. The city manager and I have talked about this in my one-on-one meetings, as far as the social services agencies of the community at large. Yes, government can come to a point alongside, but it cannot be on the onus of the government to do that. It has to be on the community stakeholders at large, which we have a very philanthropic and generous community. It's just a matter of telling the story and showing the data, because we know it works. We know
That's why
how it
master
works.
plans matter on
Yeah.
things like that. Commissioner Music.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't need to say much because you said exactly what I was gonna say. And, we were all younger and we had people in our lives that helped get us to where we are. So I would certainly be behind both of those,
bet.
But again, in order to do that, it's, someone needs to come to us with a plan to say, here's where I want, because like so many things that we've done, by showing that the commission and the city as a whole is behind them financially, encourages the other stakeholders and givers to give, knowing that it's just not them, that the city is in it as well.
And we're at the very beginning of that process. Everything you guys just
Perfect.
talked about, we have just taken the first step or two within the past couple of months to do that, so.
Thanks for
And
bringing that
that's-
up.
Commissioner Simmons and Commissioner Madden, thank you so much for expressing that concern and for being on it. And we look forward to what you want us to do on a longer-term basis. Because this commission supports PAL strongly.
Absolutely.
And always has.
Yes.
Sir. So thank you.
And Chief is also working very hard on those car crashes, by the way, so. Just to set the record straight.
He's just making.
I said that out loud.
It's just because it's in your heart, and we understand that. And we appreciate the care that's taken every day. You think how many miles you all drive, it's a lot. And sometimes with not following people that are conscientious. Okay, so if you look at your proposed comments, which are to support the 5.4323 millage on the next slide, you can see where that ranks us to within Polk County. And which is partially attainable because of the wonderful work of Lakeland Electric, in whose building we sit. And that we never want to miss how important LE is to us in the process of keeping that millage as low as it is for the contribution that we have. All right, so would somebody like to make a motion?
I so move
Okay,
that we adopt the millage that's been recommended by staff,
which is 5.4323.
which is 5.4323.
Right, is there a second?
Second?
All right, discussion, Commissioner
Just a
McLeod.
clarification, I know we all know this, but that we are advertising that rate, that the
Correct.
final adoption is in September.
Correct.
Okay,
Got it.
thank you for the correction.
Got it. A preempt. Any discussion by the commissioners on that motion? It doesn't happen to be open to the general public, does it? No. Let's do a roll call vote, and we'll start with Commissioner Simmons.
Yes,
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye.
Aye. So it unanimously passes. What other work do you have for us today?
Surprisingly, that is all.
We wanted to
So-
beat 1 o'clock.
And, okay. Oh, you.
Mayor
not
wanted
Commissioner
to-
Madden.
You have
wanted-
done that. And so, I will continue to update the commission at one-on-ones as we move forward. As I stated earlier, if there should be something to arise where we need to have a second, shorter workshop even than this, we certainly can. And, if that's not the case, then as was suggested, we will have the public hearings and the discussions, especially at the first reading of that. And the dates for that, you now see on the screen there, September 7th and September 21st. And just a reminder, those are evening meetings. And we still have our regular commission meetings in the month of September as well.
One other question we could ask, and I think that was brought up about accelerating the museum's 250 to 500. If there's value in that in the first year, from your perspective, that's certainly something I'm sure they would be appreciative of, but isn't necessarily something that we need to do. I think 250 is what we've agreed on. Comments?
That's if I'm understanding your question correctly, that's a commission decision. We have programmed in, as was on the bottom there, the new request of the 250 over 2 years, but the commission is the one to decide whether or not. Did you?
Yeah, I'd say, Commissioner Music, I took your comment about you're in agreement of accelerating their payment. I took that to mean from the 100 per year for 5 years up to 250 over 2 years,
As you had it
correct?
on there, correct.
Okay, all right,
Oh,
yeah.
not that you wanted to make it
Not
250 twice.
faster,
I
yeah.
took it,
Oh, I thought you meant
That's how I took
500
it
at
too.
one.
that's my bad read. Okay, so good. Then we're all fine.
As it is.
As is, right?
As recently
Presented.
requested. Just, I would like to
about that.
make sure you're reminded of, as we talk about September 7th and September 21st, your attendance is much appreciated, because if you do anything over 5.1451 mils, you have to have 5 affirmative votes. No matter how many people show up, you have to have 5 affirmative votes. At the 21st.
Second.
That,
At the 21st. Okay, so if you want to keep the current millage, you've got to have 5 affirmative votes.
got it.
And you'll be moving backwards a good bit if you end up with 4 votes.
Are any of us planning not to be there on the 21st or 7th? Okay, so we only 2?
I'm working on trying to get back, so I'll
Right.
let you know.
Okay, right. So we all have 6 there, because he'll get it done.
City Manager, can I just give a youth council, just a quick 1-minute update while all the commissioner here, because we're going to run into a deadline. Kevin Cook, Director of Communications for the City of Lakeland. Thank you for the time. We've got the Youth Council website set up. It's part of the boards and committees. We sent out a press release. Thank you, Commissioner Madden, for your quote that went to the media. We've also got that posted on our news blog. So if you have any students in mind now, you can send them to the website to download the application. Yes, ma'am.
They have to live in the city limits?
Yes.
Okay. That just booted out
Thank you.
my recommendations.
I have one other item that I want to ask you about, and it's really a thumbs up. As you know, when Commissioner Lindsay made the presentation on the half-cent sales tax, one of the things that he would also like to have is a letter from each commission body, so I would write ours for us on your behalf, that supports putting it on the ballot, just so that it's a referendum. Isn't a position that you're taking personally on it. It's that we would want it to be included as a referendum item on the ballot, which he needs to have on a timely basis, and I can write today or Monday. But I don't want to do that without people saying yes. So, everybody in agreement on that? All right?
Yeah.
Okay, I will write it. Thank you. We're adjourned.